Hello, my name is Dr. Laced, and today I'm going to be talking about the thesis and supporting points of a piece of writing. Thinking is a lot of fun. You do it all the time, sometimes without even realizing that thinking is what you're doing. Maybe you think about your past. Maybe you think about your future. Maybe you think about other people. Maybe you think about the best way of doing something, or about what you should or shouldn't eat, or about what's going on in the news. Congratulations! You have a brain, and it is working, churning away and doing what brains do best: contemplating, interpreting, theorizing, inventing, agreeing, arguing, deliberating, and evolving. Brains are fun to play with. If you have a brain, and if it does all of these things, then you have all of the raw materials you need to do academic work. The next step is to figure out how to go from having all these great thoughts to communicating them in a way that marks them as academic. What does that mean? On the one hand, communicating ideas in an academic style has a social function. It communicates to other people that you are in the club of academic discourse. The more important function, however, of academic expression is cognitive. It doesn't have to do with how you sound to other people. It is more about what you do with your thoughts to adapt them to the academic style of communicating. There are many different features of academic communication, many of which are stylistic and relatively superficial, but there is one feature of academic communication that is deeply structural and functional. Unlike random thoughts, interpersonal conversation, creative writing, and other forms of expression, academic writing is characterized by the intellectual process of focalization. Modern academic communication is based on the scientific method, which always begins with a specific hypothesis to be tested and either supported or disproved. An experimental scientist makes an educated guess about something, a seedling deprived of sunlight will die, and then gathers evidence to test the hypothesis. For the scientist, the hypothesis acts as a cognitive lens that limits the scope of the investigation. The hypothesis becomes the yardstick to measure what is relevant to the investigation and what is not, and it provides the context within which all of the experimental data is measured and evaluated. In academic writing, the hypothesis becomes the thesis. As you have probably heard before, the thesis is the main point or organizing principle of a piece of writing. Like the scientist's hypothesis, the writer's thesis statement articulates the purpose or upshot of a piece of writing in a single sentence. If writing teachers tend to dwell on the importance of a clearly articulated thesis statement, it is because it is such a core principle of academic writing, and also because it is the element of academic writing that is the most different from what we ordinarily do with our thoughts. Left to their own devices, brains usually like to branch out, expand, circulate, and waffle. They like to dwell on some things and avoid thinking about other things in a kind of open-ended state of free play. The transition to academic writing, however, requires that thinkers move their thoughts in an opposite direction, drawing a circle around some very specific idea and then putting aside anything outside of that circle. Here's an example. I'm thinking about donuts. There are a lot of different kinds, all delicious in their own way. Who invented donuts? Why do they sometimes have a hole in the middle? Why do some donuts not have a hole in the middle? When is the last time I had a donut? What are the best places to get donuts around here? Who do I know that doesn't like donuts, and what's their deal? If donuts are so bad for you, then why do they taste so good? I am having open-ended, random thoughts about donuts. But then I find myself in an academic context. Maybe I'm writing a paper for a college class. Maybe I am invited to give a conference presentation. Maybe I am writing a thought piece for an online publication. Maybe I am putting together an episode of a food-oriented podcast series. For some reason, I am called upon to express some of my thoughts about donuts in a formal, inquiry-based rhetorical environment. While my random thoughts provide a rich repository of possibilities, I will need to identify a kind of anchor thought that will serve as a focal point for everything that I have to say about donuts. I have to switch from a this and also this mentality to a this and only this mentality. The decision to focalize my comments around a central thesis is what will mark my discourse as academic writing, differentiating it from other genres such as stand-up comedy, personal reflection, or stream of consciousness. I need to pick one important thing that I have to say about donuts and then use that main idea as the central point around which everything else that I have to say will orbit. Thesis statements can be very general or very specific. A general thesis statement is one that takes a broad approach to its topic. Here are some examples of general thesis statements. Donuts are delicious. The donut has a rich, interesting history. There are a lot of unhealthy things in a donut. And then on the other hand, specific thesis statements take a more narrow focus and look at one very particular aspect of a research topic. For example, the hole is the most interesting part of a donut. Out of all the different kinds of donuts, the Bavarian cream reigns supreme. The two spellings of donut reflect a deep divide in the linguistic culture of North America. Whether you gravitate toward a more general or a more specific thesis statement will depend on the context of the writing project that you're working on, as well as on what you have to say about the topic. Both approaches can be the starting point for effective compositions. Likewise, one can write effective academic compositions around thesis statements that are either persuasive, like stop eating donuts, they're bad for you, or merely informative. There are 3 major categories of donuts, for example. It doesn't really matter exactly what your thesis is, as long as 1, you can state it in a single declarative sentence, and number 2, it sets the stage for you to go into more detail. This second point is important. The thesis has to be a statement that you can defend, explain, reflect on, and elaborate on. You can tell if a thesis statement is good by asking whether it branches off into different things that you might potentially say about a thesis. To me, donuts are delicious is a great thesis statement because I can tease it out in a million different directions by itemizing all the different reasons why I think donuts are delicious. The different kinds of fillings, frostings, sprinkles, shapes, colors, the different kinds of donuts, the different kinds of occasions when it's fun to eat donuts, the different kinds of things I like to eat with donuts, the evidence of donuts' popularity as reflected in the ubiquity of donut shops, the mythology and lore of the donut, famous people who have said how much they like donuts. Before too long, I have enough material for a complete book or series of books, all devoted to explicating this single, simple thesis. Moreover, each of these subordinate points can be thought of as their own thesis statements. Once I articulate one of these supporting ideas, it can also become subdivided into its constituent aspects and perspectives. For an academic writer, this coalescing and breaking apart, this formation of ideas that generate baby ideas, and the subsequent development of these baby ideas into even smaller babies, constitutes the basic rhythm and pattern of thinking. This is how writers develop a single statement into a 20-page paper, how one idea becomes a complete book, or how one insight becomes the basis for an entire career. Of course, that is the magic and power of the thesis. It acts as a magnet for collecting different ideas and making them all stick together. For a writer, it can act as a source of inspiration to develop new ideas, new paragraphs, new perspectives, and new observations. For a reader, it sets the expectations of what to anticipate in a new piece of writing. If English teachers have been telling you your whole life to appreciate the value of a thesis statement, this is why. Not because it has some value in itself, but because it is an engine for writing, guiding thinkers deeper into their own thoughts and helping them to collect and arrange their best ideas.